It was a frigid winter night in New York City, the type that caused the glass skyscraper to glisten like frozen crystal beneath the glow of the street lamps. Within one of the metropolis's most opulent dining establishments, a group of influential men gathered at a table, encircled by affluence, ego, and an unsettling quiet. Their attire consisted of tailored suits that cost more than the average person's annual income, their timepieces sparkled with presumption, and their speech carried the weight of command. Presiding over the table was Richard Wallace, the billionaire whom everyone feared, admired, and coveted. He had constructed a fortune starting from absolute nothing. However, this evening, he stood on the brink of making a choice that would transform his existence entirely. Just as the waiter prepared to replenish their glasses, a young server, anxious yet oddly composed, bent toward him and murmured something that caused the entire universe to stand still around him. "Don't sign that." If you think that a single gesture of kindness or bravery can alter someone's destiny permanently, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Untold Stories 0.4, because narratives like this one serve as reminders that empathy still thrives even in the most ruthless domains of influence. Richard shifted his gaze slightly, his piercing eyes examining the young woman who had just presumed to interrupt a transaction worth billions. Her tone wavered, but her gaze remained steady. The remaining men seated at the table scoffed, entertained by what they perceived as a servant crossing boundaries. Yet something within Richard's core, something concealed beneath decades of avarice and drive, awakened. For the first time in many years, someone wasn't intimidated in his presence, not motivated by adulation or terror, but by authentic care. The server, whose identification badge displayed the name Emily, promptly retreated, comprehending the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. She attempted to blend into the surroundings, her pulse pounding. She had glimpsed the paperwork while pouring water, merely a fleeting look, but sufficient to detect something deeply troubling. The agreement Richard was on the verge of signing would result in the shutdown of numerous small enterprises, one of them being the bakery her deceased father had once operated, a bakery that had nourished the community with warmth and generosity before the massive corporation consumed it entirely. She couldn't allow another household to be stripped of everything the way hers had been. Richard remained motionless, pen gripped in his fingers, while the other business leaders pressured him to finalize the document. They emphasized the returns, the growth opportunities, the figures. However, their voices dissolved into an indistinct hum. All he could process were those three words reverberating through his consciousness. "Don't sign that." He gazed down at the document. The figures were impressive, the prospect of increased fortune mesmerizing. Still, concealed behind the ink existed innumerable lives, individuals he would never encounter, narratives he would never absorb, households who would sacrifice everything while he acquired yet another vessel or estate. He had devoted years pursuing dominance, but at what price? His spouse had abandoned him. His child scarcely acknowledged him. His residence, though expansive, resembled a barren gallery brimming with extravagance, but devoid of joy. And now this young woman, a server collecting gratuities merely to exist, possessed the nerve to prevent him from transgressing another boundary. He placed the pen down. The space fell into silence. Every man seated at the table gazed at him in astonishment. "Richard, what are you doing?" one of them demanded sharply. Another muttered furiously, "This deal is everything." Yet Richard offered no response. Instead, he rose to his feet, inhaled deeply, and declared something that caused the room to become still. "Maybe everything isn't what I need anymore." The gathering concluded suddenly. The associates departed in rage. Emily remained immobilized near the corner, terrified she had just forfeited her employment. However, rather than displaying fury, Richard approached her wearing an expression she never anticipated witnessing: appreciation. He inquired about her name gently, and she responded, "Emily, just Emily." Throughout the following days, Richard couldn't cease contemplating her statement. He had constructed his domain through mercilessness, but for the first time, he wondered if achievement meant destroying others in the process. He examined the documents, scrutinized the agreement, and uncovered that Emily had been correct. The consolidation was immoral, taking advantage of hundreds of laborers for the advantage of a handful of wealthy men like himself. He felt revolted, not by them, but by his own actions. He contacted his attorney and terminated the arrangement. Then something within him started to transform. Richard Wallace, formerly the most unfeeling entrepreneur on Wall Street, began exploring the communities his corporation had impacted. He encountered the employees who had been dismissed, the small proprietors who had declared insolvency, and the households fighting to recover. And with each handshake, each expression of sorrow, he experienced a burden being removed from his spirit. Several weeks afterward, Richard came back to that identical restaurant. The same table, the same serene atmosphere, but this occasion, he wasn't present to authorize an agreement. He requested Emily's presence. When she came forward, nervous as previously, he smiled authentically for the first time in years. He expressed gratitude once more, not merely for rescuing him from a damaging transaction, but for rousing him from an existence of ignorance. He invited her to be seated, though she wavered. Then he revealed something that rendered her without words. He had established a new organization, not for financial gain, not for reputation, but for transformation. The organization's mission was to assist small enterprises in recovering from corporate acquisitions, to aid single guardians, and to restore communities devastated by selfishness. He christened it the Second Chance Fund. Emily's vision blurred with emotion. She couldn't comprehend that a few murmured statements had ignited something this profound. But Richard hadn't concluded. He extended to her a role at the organization, not as a superficial gesture of benevolence, but because he recognized she possessed the compassion and valor the world required in greater abundance. She agreed, her hands quivering, understanding that her late father's vision of generosity and integrity was somehow being resurrected through her actions. Months elapsed, and the account of the billionaire and the courageous server circulated throughout the city. Citizens started referring to it as the whisper that changed a billionaire's heart. Richard's enterprise underwent a metamorphosis. Rather than pursuing limitless expansion, he commenced investing in individuals, distributing equitable compensation, championing local suppliers, and financing educational initiatives for disadvantaged young people. The men who previously calculated life in currency now calculated it in existences transformed. However, the most remarkable element of the account arrived one evening when Emily was requested to address the audience at the organization's inaugural commemoration. Positioned before hundreds of attendees, she glanced across the venue and observed Richard beaming, modest and gratified. She informed the gathering, her voice saturated with feeling, that occasionally the most modest gesture of bravery, even a whisper, can resonate more powerfully than 1,000 declarations. And when she concluded, the entire auditorium stood in unison. People applauded, some wept, and Richard's vision sparkled with a variety of tears that only emerge from salvation. If this narrative moved your spirit, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Untold Stories 0.4, because kindness doesn't require wealth, power, or fame. It only needs courage. Speech Balloon Special Request. Tell us in the comments below, what would you have done if you were in Emily's place? Would you have dared to whisper the truth?